Important details like your stress, like how you're feeling, you bring them in, but you're visualizing yourself succeeding regardless. And that kind of visualization's worked really well for me. Like, again, I learned that from a sports psychologist in the gym, and it applies so much to what's going on out there. So it can be such a far out concept for a lot of people, because half of them are thinking, so you're just sitting there thinking, that's all you're doing. Whereas it's a lot more than that. You're putting yourself in the moment, and that's what changes the context.
No, I mean something else. That yes, it's going to be attention. It's going to be, you're going to the feeling that people are watching you, and you're, on top and all that nervousness. But then I do reframe this. Okay, that nervousness is actually neutral. It is not good, it is not bad. It's a surge of energy.
It's a natural response.
Yeah, it is a natural response, surge of energy to get you through what you have to face.
Like, the start laughing was like different, and then that compounded more into what would eventually become my obsession becoming normal. I was like, well, if I was normal, they wouldn't be laughing at me. If I was normal, they wouldn't be trying to take the mick out of me. So those kind of fueled the first thoughts, as it were, towards what would become my inadequacies, towards my antagonism towards my disability, and that would eventually fuel what would become the pursuit which I started at 14, because that was the moment I was like, right, I'm going to do it, I'm going to become normal.
When autistic focus on something,
oh yeah, but like I say, you go all fine on the cylinders, nothing's going to stop. It's only by pure coincidence I've taken on that mentality for myself and like just be drive heavy mode. So it's just one of those things, you just got to constantly keep raising the bar and pushing on, raise the bar, pushing on.
What actually was making your days easier then? Did you have any interest, something that was, alleviating all the stress and the pressure?
Good question. Let me think about that.
I know that this thing changed through the ages.
I guess I've always liked my music. I think music was a big part of my life back then, and obviously I went through the typical teenage cycles of you don't have a sense of identity, you're still trying to figure out who the hell you are. And even today, some people are still going through that regardless if you're a teenager or not.
Yes.
I guess, yes and no. Again, a lot of it has just been, there's been quite a few coincidences that have worked well in my favour. Again, I've always had naturally a driving kind of mind anyway, and it was like I was saying to that woman before, once I reached the stage where I wanted to become normal, my mentality was, right, if I want to become normal, I should be cooking. If I want to be normal, I should have friends. If I want to be normal, and like, you get all these things, and I analysed what I thought normal people had, and because of that, I was like, right, straight away, I need to go and get those things. And I forced myself to get into those spaces, even if they weren't comfortable at first, because it aligned with an end goal I had, like at that time, becoming normal. And it's like, after that particular goal, for example, if I wanted to prove myself in conversation, I would look at everything very mechanically, in the sense that, right, what do I want to do? Well, I want to get friends. Well, how do you get friends? Well, you need to be able to talk better with people. You need to be doing this with people. You need to be doing that. So then my next train of thought would be, right, how do I achieve those things? So obviously, I'm first of all thinking, right, get books. So I get books for everything. It would be audio books, any books, and you get them, and you pick and cherry pick the skills you want to learn. And I guess for someone younger who's like trying to figure that out in school and going from one end to the other, again, I just had parents that really drove me forward, and I just took on that mindset. Absolute full-on obsession with that normality. When I was going for normality, nothing else mattered. Like, I didn't care how hard I had to work. I didn't care what I had to sacrifice. What mattered to me was getting this goal. So that was pure my drive. It's like, yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, nothing would get in my way.
Why it was so important for you to be normal? So many people are comfortable as they are.
See, when I was younger, I wasn't. And I guess part of that was because at the time I had normal friends as well. I would have this weird dynamic where I would go to my special needs school and have my disabled friends, and they were really awesome, cool people. I would then come home, and then I would have my normal friends who went to mainstream schools. And obviously, when you're that age, you don't understand yourself that well. The first thing you're going to fall upon is you want to fit in. And that's like anyone, you just want to fit in. And because of that, because I wanted, well, why can't I go to a mainstream school?
But that means that going home to have different kind of friends means that your mom allowed it. She did not surround you only. She didn't go only on the group special.
Yes.
You did.
It was hard for her at first though. I remember I had to have this mobile phone. I'd have to text her or ring her at least an hour every time, and I'd only be out by certain times. Like, it was a really hard thing for her to do that, to let me go. So obviously she's been part of my life all the way, and she had to watch me go from one stage to another. But I guess that's probably where my stepfather kind of stood in and provided that positive influence.
Yes.
Because his eyes, it was like, well, what's stopping him doing that? He can go and do those things and like those kind of things. So he would help drive me forward in that respect.
But your friends as well, even that they were so young, they should have the mentality of including you and being.
They did at first. And this is where it gets really interesting. So eventually, as we started growing older, the dynamic kind of changed, and like I said in my speech, they kind of started laughing at me a bit more. The understanding seemed to die off a bit, because once you reach a teenage, your main priority is fitting in, and anything that looks different is automatically alien, and you're going to rebel against that because you don't have the mental maturity to think, all right, this is different, that's the way it is. And some people are, but my friends, well. From going on a lower end to the higher end.
Yes.
It's partly, I'm not gonna lie to you, part of me is I don't know. I have theories around why it might have happened. Obviously what helps is the fact that I had an early diagnosis. Compared to a lot of people, I was diagnosed at 3. So I've had the big advantage of having that knowledge, and I've also had the big advantage of having a mother who was really, really on it in regards to my development. She really followed her gut a lot of the time, but she felt that I needed to, like, if I needed to be in a certain place, like, she would go anywhere. Like, the only reason we ended up in the northeast of England is because she wanted me to go to this very particular school. Like, she would have went anywhere in the country for me. That's like, my mother would literally give everything towards it. And obviously, I went to special needs school, so obviously the first one really helped. But then she recognized when I was developing and when there was a point where I had to come out. So like, I'd essentially outgrown the place, not that I'm disrespectful, but outgrown the place. And I think this is a big thing a lot of people tend to miss, is that they'll just keep the same place in there because they're comfortable there and because they're happy there. Whereas when I was getting taken out this primary school, I was kicking and screaming, I wasn't happy. But my mother and then my stepfather at the time knew exactly what they wanted to accomplish, and they knew that it was a necessary step for me to develop. So they took me out and put me there anyway.
But she should have a very sharp feeling about how much you can take.
There's a fine line. I know exactly where you're going with that. The reason I'm going to combat that a little bit is because we, despite what everyone says about our development needs and our thing about obsession to keep things the same, we are incredibly adaptable. I mean, you've proven it yourself. You've gone from a totally another country to here, and boom, you're here, and that's great. But I think we're incredibly adaptable. It's like I was saying to one of the ladies who's like taught the question me after I did the talk, and she was saying how do you sort of adapt to changes. Yes, you might have us kick and scream, but we're going to adapt anyway. Like, eventually, if we're going to accept this as the new reality, we're going to go on to that and we're going to accept that. So yes, you might get kicking and screaming. Yes, you might have a very unsettled child for even a couple of months. But if you genuinely believe in your heart it's the right decision to make and you know it's going to help develop, make the choice.